I will now call to order the Town of St. Andrews regular council meeting for the month of January 2018, held on Monday, January 8th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at the W.C. O'Neill Arena Complex. Recording of attendance, I note that all members of council are in attendance. I'll move to the approval of the agenda, and I will note for council that there are two amendments that will need to be made to the agenda, matters that arose that were not included on the agenda that was published on last Wednesday. So I'll be looking for, under Finance and Administration, FA 171101, oh, sorry, my apologies. Under, again, Finance and Administration, FA 180101, looking to have a motion to add to the agenda dealing with the policy 17-02, the financial planning policy. Councillor Grew, can I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Harrison. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of amending the agenda to include that item, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that is amended to the agenda. Secondly, under M, closed session, there is a need that has arisen for council to enter into a closed session pursuant to the, I don't know whether we're still using the Municipalities Act or the Local Governance Act, but either way, I think it's the same. Information concerning legal opinions or advice provided to the municipality by the municipal solicitor. Could we have a motion to that effect? Thank you, Councillor Grew. And the seconder, Deputy Mayor Henderson. Any comments in relation to that? All in favor of that matter being added to the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that matter will also be added to the agenda. Now I'll go back to the approval of the agenda. Yes?
There was a third amendment as well, and that was the addition of the working session related to the budget.
Oh, my apologies. I thought that was on the original agenda. Okay, we will, the third, my fault, we'll go to N and add as an amendment to the agenda a council working session on the 2018 budget. Could I have a motion to that effect, please, to add that to the agenda? Yep. Councillor Bishop, thank you, and Deputy Mayor seconds that motion. If there's no comment, all in favor? Yep.
Just a quick comment. I would like to suggest that we take out the words working session and just have 2018 budget, because I understand there's a motion that will be coming out of that discussion. So it really doesn't. So I would suggest we just say, you know, we add under item N 2018 budget rather than just calling it a working session. Seeing
no other objections to that, I guess we can amend that further and say we will just amend that and we'll refer to it as a 2018 budget session. Okay, now we'll go back to we'll go ahead. Now we can go back to the approval of the amended agenda. And so I'll be looking for a motion to approve the agenda as amended times 3. Deputy Mayor Henderson, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Boyd, thank you. And all in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. All right. Disclosure of conflict of interest. Seeing none, we will move on to D, the approval of the minutes of previous meetings. We will first go to the minutes of the regular meeting of Council December 4th, 2017. Be looking for a motion, please, to approve those minutes. Councillor Grew, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Bishop. Any comments in relation to the minutes of December 4th? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of council, regular meeting of council, December 4th, 2017, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Seeing none opposed, those minutes are approved. Then we will move to the minutes of the special meeting of council December 7th, 2017. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes, please? Councillor Bishop and a seconder. Councillor Grew, thank you very much. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All in favor of approving the minutes of the special meeting of council December 7th, 2017, please signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed? Seeing none, those minutes are also approved. We will go to then the minutes of the special meeting of council of December 12th, 2017. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes, please? Councillor Grew, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Boyd, thank you. Any comments? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes of the special meeting of council December 12th, 2017, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Finally, we'll move to the minutes of the special meeting of council of December 18th, 2017. Looking for a motion to approve those minutes, please. Deputy Mayor Henderson, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Bishop, thank you very much. Any comments in relation to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes of the special meeting of council December 18th, 2017, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those minutes are also approved. We will move to E, presentations. There are none. F, communications. There are none. We will then go to the staff reports, and I think, tonight ask our Chief Administrative Officer, Angela McLean, to read her report for the month.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the opportunity to report to you on behalf of town staff. 2017 was a busy year for council and staff, and I would like to take the opportunity to highlight some of our recent achievements as well as plans for 2018. In 2017, some of the projects we completed include the following: water, wastewater, and stormwater projects on Charles Street, Alexander Crescent, Joes Point Road, Augustus, Queen Street, and Edward Street. Replacement of manhole structures on Frederick and Water Streets, paving on Champlain Avenue, the Bar Road from Mowat to Champlain, the Youth Center Skate Park, library parking lot, and 127 designated highway. Hiring a wharfinger, bylaw enforcement officer, creation of a new position called asset manager, filling the vacant public works supervisor position, delivery of a new fire truck, emergency repairs at the wharf and at Market Square, upgrades to washrooms at the wharf and at the arena, an upgrade of the town hall IT server, special public meetings on the budget, trail route options, Market Square development, deer management, Indian Point land lease, heritage bylaw, and several public hearings for development projects. Our relationship with the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission continued to evolve in 2017. We are working with them on the development of a recycling program and a regional recreation plan for 2018. And we recently managed the transition of planning and building inspection service delivery to the Commission, a move that will result in planning efficiencies and cost savings. The town was pleased to see the grand opening of a seniors apartment complex in 2017, and we entered into development agreements for a new condominium project at 260 Water Street, rebuilding of the site at 209 Water Street, artistic and cultural developments at Kira, and the aesthetic salon at 161 Augustus Street. It is also exciting to note that our planner is in discussions with several developers for potential new projects in 2018. Council also ratified a letter of intent to sign a new long-term lease with the Kiwanis for the land at Indian Point, and approved the takeover of ownership of the Charlotte County Courthouse facility from the province. Over the past year, the total assessment valuation for the town increased by 2.4%, bringing the total to $301 million. Unfortunately, we received no equalization payment from the province, and our core funding component will only increase by a mere $5,000 from last year, for a total of $59,000. Like all municipalities, it is not possible for the town to fund our many infrastructure challenges going forward. One of the more strategic initiatives we have undertaken over the past year is the implementation of a comprehensive asset management system. Initial estimates from our analysis put our 5-year capital requirements at $11.5 million. These are the emergency projects only. This does not include projects that we do not yet completely understand, such as climate change mitigation and protection. It is clear that town revenues are currently not at a level where our mounting capital needs can be managed. Our $1.19 mill rate is 22% below the provincial average of $1.53, and our water and wastewater rates are far below those of most other jurisdictions. I would urge Council to consider these factors as they finalize the 2018 budget and 5-year financial plan. Capital priorities for 2018 will be finalized as part of the budget process, but at a minimum, are expected to include repairs to this arena roof, continued work on the designated Highway Route 127, water, wastewater, stormwater projects on Edward Street and Augustus Street, and the roof replacement at the fire hall. Council will be finalizing other capital decisions regarding Market Square development, wharf repairs, and the courthouse and arena renovations over the coming weeks, as well as considering information for a new medical center, enhancements to downtown parking options, as well as public washroom availability. Council also approved several policy and planning documents in 2017, including a new procedural bylaw, the advisory committee policy, financial planning policy, and investment policy. With new provincial legislation now in place for municipal affairs, we will turn our efforts to aligning our bylaws and plans accordingly. A new municipal plan is expected to take center stage on the list of our 2018 priorities, and discussions on this will begin at the council table next week. Our tourism numbers reached record levels in 2017, following the receipt of awards, including the Canadian Planners Great Street Award, the USA Top Canadian Destination Award, and several special events in town, including Canada Day Paddle Fest, Rev 3 Triathlon, Indulge, the Loyalist Landing, Christmas by the Sea, and many others. We look forward to hosting the Canadian Under-18 Curling Championships at our arena in April of this year, further enhancing our profile and visitor numbers. I wish to thank several organizations with whom we partnered for other programs that enhance the livability of our community, including the St. Andrews Volunteer Fire Department, the Youth Center Skate Park Committee, the Age-Friendly Community Committee, St. Andrews Farmers Market Association, the Heritage Board, and many others. The designation of top destination in Canada is due in no small part to the efforts of all of our volunteers and community leaders. In conclusion, as always, I wish to thank Mayor and Council and our dedicated team of town employees and volunteers for their continued support. 2018 is already shaping up to be a busy year, and I look forward to working with Council in the days ahead to finalize the 2018 budget and business plan, and with staff as we work to implement the priorities of Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Any questions? Thank you very much. That's great. I will call now upon Corporal Jason Hansen to provide the police report, please.
Your Worship, Council, Happy New Year. So this is the monthly RCMP activity report for the period of November 21, 2017 to December 20th, 2017. During this period, a total of 23 calls for service or investigations, down 7 from the previous period, and 3 street checks were reported during this review. Of these, a total of 11 criminal code investigations, which is up from 6 from the previous period, were conducted by St. Andrews RCMP. The most serious criminal incidents being that of a series of thefts from vehicles, Also of note were 2 separate incidents of found hard drugs, including an incident in which over 30 syringes of drug residue and other drug paraphernalia of IV drug use were found by children playing outdoors. There were 6 check stops and patrols conducted for impaired driving, most notably during the National Impaired Driving Enforcement Day. That was December 2nd. Radar enforcement and intersection safety conducted, in which approximately 565 vehicles were checked, resulting in 1 charge, 9 written warnings, and a 7-day suspension. St. Andrews RCMP members also took part in a number of community events, including escorting the Christmas parade on December 2nd, the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women Memorial at NBCC on December 6th. Attached is the closed summary of investigations. Under the criminal code, 1 incident of mischief, use playing pranks involving a dead animal. Break and enter, RV door open, it turned out just to be insecure from high winds. 3 incidents of fraud, possible internet telephone scams. 4 incidents of theft from vehicles. Again, to remind the public that no matter how safe a community, often crime is a crime of opportunity. In these cases, all were insecure vehicles. Just, I think, because of the early December, it's, I guess, Christmas shopping season for criminals too. But that was the 4 incidents, were all related in the same area. Harassing communications involving telephone harassment. Under other investigations, 1 false abandoned 911, and 1 noise complaint. 1 complaint of possibly use of a firearm was shown to be a pellet gun. A door alarm, 4 assistance calls, including assistance to an outside police department and medical. 1 dog act complaint, 1 request for peace bond, and of course 2 incidents of a Schedule I substance, and 1 incident of a cannabis minor possession. 1 roadside suspension, and as noted, the 6 check stops in which 565 vehicles were checked. 2 reportable single vehicle collisions and other roving traffic for speeding. So in relation to the traffic thing, of course, we talked about speeding, intersection safety, and then I guess at this point, now we're at the start of the new year, just to put a bug in here for council that we're starting to plan as a district for the 2018-2019 fiscal year for policing priorities. So again, if there's ongoing trends or concerns of the council, that certainly it's been forwarded to me, or again myself and Sergeant Henderson be willing to meet again with council to discuss policing priorities for the upcoming year. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Corporal Hanson. Appreciate it. And yes, we probably will at some point call upon you to talk about policing priorities. You can. Okay. All right. I think that's it for the staff reports that we need to present this evening. I'll be looking for a motion to approve all of the staff reports, please. Councillor Grew, thank you, and a seconder for that. Councillor Harrison, thank you. There are no comments. All in favor of approving the staff reports as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Very good. The staff reports are approved. We'll move on in the agenda to the introduction, consideration, and passing of bylaws and motions. We'll move first to finance and administration.
All right. I'm with you. Will I start with this one that has been added first?
Yes.
Okay, FA 180101, dated January 2018, submitted by Councillor Grew, and it's regarding financial planning policy. The annual budget process is of great importance to the town, and it is important that this process be well-defined, transparent, and effective. The financial planning policy, which was passed by Council in September 2017, moves the town from a yearly budget to a 5-year strategic financial plan. This amendment provides additional direction and clarification to staff for the preparation of future budgets in specific areas. 1, the capital program funding. 2, reserve funds. 3, disposal of assets. And 4, utility funding. And the motion is, move that council adopt the Amendment 01 to the Financial Planning Policy P17-02.
Can I have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Grew, thank you. Council, in relation to that matter.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Henderson.
Your Worship, through you, if I may, just making sure that both our town treasurer and CAO are comfortable with the financial planning policy at this point.
I think it would be our preference to complete the 2018 budget and have a more thorough discussion around the item of capping and what that contribution should be, as well as item number 2 on external funding.
Councillor Harrison?
It might be helpful if someone read in the actual schedule, so.
Okay, did we miss the schedule on that?
Or, it was read in, was it the motion was read, or?
The schedule?
You read in the actual amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People at home from going in.
Your Worship, through you, if I may.
Yes.
From hearing from staff, I know that this has been something we've been talking about for a while, but in the same sense, this is something that both our CAO and treasurer have to live. And although it would be great to put it through, I'd like them to be comfortable with it as well. So at this time, I would like to propose a motion to table this until after the budget process, so we can dive into it and make sure that both staff and council are comfortable with this. And again, I do realize we have talked about this for a while, but I don't see the urgency in this at this point to read it through.
I would second the deputy mayor's motion. There's no urgency with this. This is for future budgets.
Okay.
And I think the CAO's advice there of seeing what happens with this year's budget is sound.
All right.
And I think,
So we can consider that to be a friendly amendment, I suppose, and we will,
It's a different.
yeah,
We'll just vote on that and then that'll
yeah.
just, put it under new business next month.
All righty, thank you, Mr. Spear. Okay, I will call for a motion then to, I'll call for a seconder for the motion to table by Deputy Mayor. Okay, Councillor Boyd, thank you for a motion. Any further comments?
I would suggest, Your Worship, that we table this to, say, February's meeting. Would that be appropriate? And then put it on the agenda for February.
February, and we'll have another opportunity to discuss it after the budget's finalized, perhaps at the committee meeting.
Mhm.
Okay, okay. Okay, all in favor of tabling that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Councillor. None opposed? That is tabled. Okay, now we will go to, back to Councillor Bishop.
The next item is FA 171101, dated November 14th, 17, submitted by our CAO Angela McLean. And it's regarding second reading of R17-03, a bylaw to repeal Bylaw 00-1, related to the establishment of a planning advisory committee. Background. At the November 6, 2017 council meeting, the Town of St. Andrews Council declared their intent by motion to enter into a contract with the Southwest NB Service Commission for planning and building inspection services. Based on the RSC model, there is already a planning review advisory committee in place, so the town's planning advisory committee becomes redundant. For this reason, it is necessary to disband and repeal the town's planning advisory committee and repeal the bylaw that established that committee in 2000. The first reading of the bylaw R17-03, a bylaw to repeal Bylaw 00-1, related to the establishment of a planning advisory Committee took place at the December 4th, 2017 council meeting. To proceed, council may now give consideration to a second reading of Bylaw R17-03. And the motion, I move that Bylaw R17-03, a bylaw to repeal Bylaw 00-1, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews to establish a planning advisory committee, be read a second time.
Okay, could I have a seconder for that motion, please? Yeah, Councillor Grew, thank you. Any comments in relation to the matter? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the motion to read for a second time the bylaw as stated, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. That is passed, and therefore I will read the bylaw for the second time. Bylaw R17-03, a bylaw to repeal Bylaw 00-1, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews to establish a planning advisory committee. The Council of the Town of St. Andrews, under authority vested in it by Section 74(1)A of the Community Planning Act, enacts as follows. 1. The following bylaw enacted by the Town of St. Andrews and amendments thereto are hereby appealed. A. Bylaw 00-1, a bylaw to establish a planning advisory committee enacted May 1st, 2000. 2. The repeal of said bylaw shall not affect any penalty, forfeiture, or liability incurred before such appeal, or any proceeding for enforcing the same completed or pending at the time of repeal, nor shall it repeal or disturb, invalidate, or prejudicially affect any matter or anything whatsoever completed, existing, or pending at the time of repeal. Read the second time, January the 8th, 2018. Great, thank you. We move on. Deputy Mayor Henderson.
Yes, reference number BRSE 171003, submitted by Chris Spear. The subject is Bylaw 17-04, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews to impose a special business improvement levy. The background, the St. Andrews Business Improvement Corporation, Incorporated, has submitted their budget for 2018. As part of the approval process, Council must enact a bylaw outlining the levy for 2018. Bylaw 17-04 was introduced and read for a first reading at the November 6, 2017 Council regular meeting. Second reading took place at the December 4, 2017 regular Council meeting. A hearing of objections took place at a special meeting for December 11, 2017. Council may now give consideration of proceeding to a third and final reading. The motion reads, move that Council proceed to third and final reading of Bylaw 17-04, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews to impose a special business improvement levy.
Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Harrison, thank you. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll move to the question. All in favor of approving that motion to move to third reading of that bylaw, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, I will read the bylaw for the third and final time. This is the Town of St. Andrews Bylaw number 17-04, a bylaw of the Town of St. Andrews to impose a special business improvement levy. Pursuant to Section 5.1 of the Business Improvement Areas Act, Revised Statutes of New Brunswick 2014, Chapter 102, be it enacted by the Council of the Town of St. Andrews as follows. 1. That a special business improvement tax be levied for the calendar year 2018 on all non-residential property within the business improvement area of the town, said area having been designated in the Town of St. Andrews Bylaw number 72, enacted on June 4th, 1984. And 2, that the special business improvement tax for calendar year 2018 shall be at the rate of 20 cents on each $100 assessment of real property being the non-residential property in the business improvement area. guess we don't need to read the schedule. We're okay with that, so therefore, that is read for the third and final time this 8th day of January 2018. All right. We move on to we move on, there's, under new business, there's none. Question period. There will be none, since there's no one here to ask questions. Councillors and deputy mayors' comments. Anyone have comment? Councillor Bishop.
I would say from the CAOS report, we can all see that we don't have enough income in a small town to do all the repairs and capital projects that we need to money for. So, and our mill rate is very low, and so just to let people out there understand that there may be a little jump in the rate of taxation. And I'd like to say to all the citizens out there, have a happy new year. Hope that 2018 brings you good health and a very happy year. And just want to say congratulations to both Jimmy Ross Jr. and to our other Danny Bartlett, our other volunteer firefighter, on their years of service. So congratulations and thanks for all the good work.
Thank you, Councillor Bishop. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I missed the last meeting. I was on vacation, but I just, now that all the holiday and Christmas decorations are down, I just wanted to recognize one last time the Public Works and the job they did in the community. I really think it sets the atmosphere for Christmas by the Sea, and to be completely honest, it's our biggest draw, and they should be proud of the work that they do. The town looked fabulous, and as well, Kevin Simmons and Ali Spear for coming up with a lobster trap Christmas tree. Just enhanced what we already had, and it certainly added for a wonderful December in St. Andrews. And the last thing I want to say, since again I did miss the last meeting, is that we had the arena infrastructure announcement for the arena roof, and this room that we were in was packed, and it was a busy Saturday in St. Andrews. So for everyone that came to that particular announcement to show all three levels of government how important this building is to our community, I think it really spoke at the urgency it was to continue this building, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who took the time to come.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further comments? Councillor Gumicha.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to say congratulations and job well done to all the folks who worked so hard to bring forward the idea that Charlotte County is a great place to come and ride your bike and bicycle and work on bicycling infrastructure. This idea started with a small group with a small working committee led by some town residents, including Jamie Smith and Lara Cooper. So a few years ago, this group got together and started working on it. Others on this committee, included Don Menton, myself, Joel Halls, Bob Poirier, and Muriel Jarvis. The committee met monthly and was soon joined by Darren Turner, who took the idea forward and was instrumental in getting the input of other nearby communities. Finally, with help from Sentier MB Trails and the Regional Service Commission and a lot of hard work by our local MLA, John Ames, our Premier Gallant, last week announced $1 million in funding to help develop Charlotte County as a cycling destination for tourism and a critical link between the East Coast Greenway, which starts down in Florida, and the newly completed Trans-Canada Trail, which goes by us up through Grand Bay. So Charlotte County was the missing link in that trail. So you can now go from Florida all the way to Victoria once we get Charlotte County up to speed. So thank you to all those people. For all the people involved in this little committee that produced such big results, job well done. And a special thank you to Darren Turner of the Terra Manor, who was instrumental in pushing this project forward. So finally, this little committee shows what hardworking, community-minded people can accomplish with a shared vision and by working together. So that was a great story, and
Thank you, Councillor.
thank you to all those folks.
All right. Very good. I think that, I guess my only comment, if no one else has a comment, I just make a very quick comment. I intend to schedule something with our CHCO television provider in the very near future, and I intend to, if they'll still invite me, I intend to have a program called the State of the Town after we finalize our budget processes, where I will talk from the mayor's chair, at least with input of everybody else on this, at this dais, about where I think we're going in the next year or two, and so I look forward to that opportunity. I think it's a good way to communicate, because obviously council, because of television maybe, but perhaps of weather, we really don't get a big turnout for council meetings, so maybe we'll get a little more on TV from the comfort of people's houses. So I'm going to try that approach. Anyway, again, I also want to make one other comment. We have had our Community Appreciation Awards on New Brunswick Day for the last few years, and this year we decided to change it to New Year's Day and to hold it for the first time at the Charlotte County Courthouse. And although it was cold outside, it was nice and cozy inside, and I think we had a really good turnout for the first time we held it there. And I think that's, again, is another one of the assets of our community that many people had really not had the opportunity to see inside, and I think that's that was a big success. I think the Appreciation Awards went off very well, and look forward to doing more of that in the near future. Thank you very much. I think we'll be, at this point in time, we'll be looking for a motion to move to closed session. Deputy Mayor Henderson?
Point of order, Your Worship.
Yep.
Do we want to talk about the budget before we move into closed session?
I think we want to deal with the closed session first.
Okay.
We discussed that. That's, we
Fair enough.
contemplated both.
This opportunity this evening is simply to present the budget to the public and give folks an opportunity to provide feedback to council before they consider that motion on Monday evening. I too would like to thank staff, and in particular Chris Spear, who's our treasurer, and I think we're on version 11, if I'm not mistaken, of the budget. And Chris has shown great patience and has done a tremendous amount of work and analysis in putting our packages together every week for consideration. So just as we start, by way of a bit of background on the process leading up to this evening's presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about the agenda. We're going to present some information about why we're all here, the legislative responsibility and authority that council has to pass a budget for the town. We're going to provide a bit of a review of some of the highlights on our operational and capital budgets in 2017. And from there, we'll move into 2018 and beyond. And we'll talk about planning for self-sufficiency in the future. And I think that is the, if there's one message that we can leave with you tonight, really, I think this is a budget that will set us up for self-sufficiency long into the future. And how are we going to achieve that? We'll have a discussion, of course, about the mill rate, about various user fees, about a change in the water and wastewater fee structure, and the need for reserves for capital planning and all of the asset management requirements that we are going to have going into the future years. And I will just mention that Chris and I are going to be playing a bit of tag team here tonight. So at this point, I'm going to hand the microphone over to him, and he's going to present a few slides, and then we'll be back and forth throughout the presentation.
So for those at home that don't know, the province recently updated the act that regulates the running of the municipalities and within the province, and it's now called the Local Governments Act. And under parts 2 and 9, we're told that, it's up to councils and the local government facilities to provide good government, to provide services or facilities and things that council considers necessary or desirable for all parts of local government. So obviously, there's something that's a necessity, like plowing the roads, garbage removal and stuff. But some of the other things, like arenas and beaches, libraries, museums, are soft services, but very important to the lifestyle that we appreciate in our community. Obviously, local governments are responsible to develop and maintain safe and viable communities, and then to foster the economic, social, environmental well-being of its community. And I'll say, for any of you that don't attend council meetings, it's a big job and a big responsibility, and it's a lot of work for these 7 people at the table every week. And it's a hard job that just doesn't get easier, but they do a commendable job and always trying to think of the community first. Getting to the budget, there are 4 components to a budget. There's the general operating fund, the general capital fund, the utility operating fund, and the utility capital fund. The general operating fund tends to be things like fire protection, general government services, public works, the library. General capital is all the projects, infrastructure needed to support those. Now, the utility operating fund is the cost of running the water and sewer department. That includes the personnel, the water treatment facilities, the funding that goes into that. And the utility capital fund is all the purchases and projects necessary to run the utility department. So going back to the general operating fund, right now we're showing a surplus before transfer for the purchase of capital assets in 2017, about $286,000. The revenue is a little higher than projected due to the sale of an asset. And earlier in the year, we had sold the Niger Reef Tea House. That was back in May. There's also an increase in property assessment base over 2016. We also had an increased fire protection cost. It's not shown on the slide. And our building permits, knowing I was sitting in the office, we had actually a boom year for St. Andrews as far as building permits go. A lot of new development, which is always a great sign for the community. And that was reflected in higher revenues to the town for the building inspection department. Now, expenses were lower too. One of the big savings for the year was that winter maintenance, believe it or not, is lower in 2017 than prior years. January and March were quite low event months, but Public Works basically got all their snow in about the last 21 days of February. And so overall, our labor costs, machine costs, and fuel costs are a lot lower than we had anticipated, one of the lowest costs we've had in years. We did have some staff vacancies this year, and staff that were filled later in the year. And our consulting fees are under budget. So what we're going to do with this extra surplus? Well, there's $145,000 transferred to the capital program that bought assets for this year. And we'll get into the presentation a little bit about what major capital projects were done this year. There's about $97,000 put into fire protection cost. This is the cost that is charged by the utility department for the availability of water for fire protection services. Some people think that it's kind of just a math adjustment, but it's really not. There's extra cost for the utility to be able to provide things like hydrants, to provide water on demand for the fire service, and that is reflected in there. And so there's a projected surplus of about $45,000 that'll be tightened by the audit by the end of May. But right now, as of today, we're thinking we'll be sitting on a surplus of about $45,000. And right now, I think we're going back to the CAO.
So the next few slides that we're going to take you through are going to highlight some of the achievements that we saw and successes that we saw in 2017. And we're going to start with the capital projects. We had a very busy season with regard to our capital plan. And first, early in the season, we started with water and wastewater and stormwater projects. And those included locations on Charles Street, Alexander Crescent, part of Joe's Point Road, Augusta Street, Queen Street, Edward Street, and replacement of manhole structures on Frederick and Water Street. We had some paving projects that were completed later in the summer, Champlain Avenue and a portion of Bar Road, that being from Mowat to Champlain, as well as paving at the Youth Center Skate Park, the Ross Memorial Library parking lot, and of course the Route 127 designated highway. That's a continuing project that we partner with the province. With regard to capital projects, we also saw emergency repairs that were unbudgeted, but we managed to find a way to get these done, those being at Market Wharf and also at Market Square. We completed some upgrades to the washroom at both the wharf and here at the arena, and an upgrade to the IT server down at Town Hall. So it was a busy season for our capital program. We also saw a number of key achievements in service improvements. We received our new fire truck, well received back in the summer, and that was unveiled to the public back on New Brunswick Day, to much fanfare. Very exciting for the fire department. We also hired a Wharfinger and bylaw enforcement officer. Tom Clark started with us back in the spring, and created a new position called asset manager, and that was funded by through the elimination of a public works position. Our new asset manager, Terry Acton, has provided, he dug his heels in first thing and provided a tremendous amount of analysis that helped us in fact prepare this budget. So I'd like to acknowledge the work of Terry and how quickly he's come up to speed. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about asset management as we proceed through the presentation. We also filled the vacant public works supervisor position that was created when Terry became our asset manager. And we reached a new agreement with the New Brunswick Southwest Region Service, the New Brunswick Southwest Service Commission for the provision of building inspection, planning, and development services. I think it's worth noting that the efforts that Council has made to be publicly accountable. I mentioned the fact that you have undertaken 10 special meetings on this budget process that have been all open to the public. There have been public consultation sessions regarding deer management, on the trail route options, as well as potential development of a redesign of Market Square, I should say. There have been a number of public meetings with presentations, including the 2017 budget, the Indian Point land lease, the Heritage Bylaw. The New Brunswick Climate Change Secretariat came in and made a presentation to Council, as did the Age Friendly Community Committee, the Anglican Parish, the Youth Center Skate Park Committee, and Ministers Island Board of Directors. So a number of public meetings with presentations. A requirement of the Community Planning Act, there were also a number of public presentations and hearings of objections regarding rezoning and municipal plan amendments. Those included projects at 161 Augusta Street, 260 Water Street, which is the Princess Royal Condominium project, and artistic and cultural improvements up at Kira, Prince of Wales. There were also referrals by Council to the PAC for opinions on those files that I just mentioned, as well as the project that has started down at 209 Water Street for redevelopment and the Heritage Bylaw. And with regard to public accountability, there was also a new procedural bylaw that was passed by Council, as well as the financial planning policy and a new investment policy for the town. A number of key achievements that I'll point out as well regarding property matters. Chris mentioned the sale of the Niger Reef Tea House, which was completed back in the spring. We also received a donation to the town in the form of some parkland down off the end of Bar Road, and we've called it the Maxwell Park. It's yet to be developed, but the potential is there for us to do some work down there as well. There was a council motion earlier this fall to assume ownership of the Charlotte County Courthouse from the province. And we understand the final paperwork on that is on the minister's desk now, and we're just waiting for sign off on that. There was ratification of the letter of intent with the Kiwanis for the land lease at Indian Point. That file had been open for a number of years, and we're pleased to reach a conclusion on that particular item. We received federal and provincial funding support for repairs to the roof here at the arena, and there was a funding announcement on that earlier in December to a packed house here at the arena. And we'll be, as a result, we're able to undertake a project of about $1.2 million to undertake emergency repairs here at the arena. And we also, as mentioned earlier, completed some emergency repairs at the Market Wharf and Market Square. And town staff did a terrific job of responding very quickly to those emergency needs so that it was a minimal disruption to the users. Now we're going to get back to numbers, and I'm going to turn it back to Chris.
This council was elected in May of 2016 and sworn in, I think, either late May or early June. So they went through the early budget process, or the first budget process last fall. And coincidentally, it was the first budget in the first month that our CAO was in her position. So it was kind of a trial by fire for everybody as we moved along. But in last year, they did hold the budget from the prior year at $1.19. Going through some other local communities, it's kind of important to see that how we sit or compare to these other communities. McAdam's currently sitting at about $1.59, St. Stephen at $1.58, Blacks Harbor at about $1.56. So the provincial average, what we'll say, I think that's for our group, Angela? So the provincial average for all municipalities from Moncton and St. John down to the smaller communities is $1.53. St. George is at $1.38, but St. Andrews is only at $1.19. I know from my years here that there's a lot of discussion back and forth on the assessments, but we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But for those at home who don't really understand, through it all, the assessment base is given to us by Service New Brunswick and the Department of Finance, and so the only tool council really has to set is the mill rate, and that is what they're always going with year after year. And right now, we are pretty near 20 cents below the, or more than 20 cents, we're 30 cents below the provincial average. So it's good to understand that. Now, one of the things that have come to light over the last couple of 3 years is the granting formulary for the province of New Brunswick. So in addition to the mill rate and the tax revenue we get, the province also gives out grants to everybody, and they've changed the name of them to Equalization Grants. Now, it's a long and complicated formula, but the best way to think about it is sort of the way the federal government thinks about it, providing equal services across Canada. So sometimes they're redistributing money to certain communities to provide better or equal services, at least in their opinion, compared to other places. But it tends to be all over the place. And from what I understand, I've seen the worksheet that goes into this, and it's essentially the ability of a community to produce its own tax revenue. In a simplistic way, what they do is they look at the total tax assessment divided over the population. And so it's kind of their measure of wealth in a very simplistic form. It's more complicated than that, but in simplest forms, that's how it's done. And so what happens is there's two components of this. One's called the core funding, which is strictly based on population, but the other is this equalization grant. Well, for St. Andrews, we get about $60,000 in core funding compared to St. Stephen, which has about a little more than double the population of 118,000, and St. George, which is just a little bit smaller than us, about 40,000. But when it comes to the equalization grant in their formulary, St. Stephen gets over $1.2 million in equalization grant, while St. Andrews gets nothing, St. George gets 75,000. And that's typical across the provinces. There's, depending on how you look, the municipalities that seem to have a stronger assessment base for a smaller population do not get these equalization grants. They're trying to put it on the councils of those municipalities to raise rates to meet their needs. Now, for St. Andrews, there's a lot of talk about arena rates and wharf rates and and building permit fees and all that. But at the end of the day, 83% of our operating revenue comes out of the tax assessment. To move forward on any type of revenue growth in order to pick up new services and things, it's going to have to come out of the tax assessment. But to remember in St. Andrews, so a 1 cent increase in our mill rate or the tax rate is only equal to $30,000. So it's not a lot of money for the municipality. Currently, our budget runs about $4 to $5 million if you throw in the utility. So $30,000 is basically a drop in the bucket. So it doesn't give a lot of flexibility to the council in only small increments. Now, for St. Andrews, from year over year, we're actually pretty lucky. As sure as many of you remember, through last year, there's a bit of a political hot potato regarding the assessment bases in Service New Brunswick. And by mid-fall, the Premier had announced that they were freezing all the assessment bases on properties till they figured out this new electronic system that was coming up with us. And so a lot of municipalities either had no growth, and some actually went backwards in growth. But for St. Andrews, we actually increased by pretty near $7 million in additional assessment, with a total tax base of $300 million, and that's the first time we've hit the $300 million mark. So that's 2.4% growth. Considering that New Brunswick inflation, I think, was about 1.5% or so, that's pretty good growth, and especially after the issues where property taxes would have been frozen for most existing properties. And so, assuming the old tax rate, or the tax rate of $1.19, that the revenue from growth in the tax base is about $83,000. So growth and development is an important part of municipal financing and municipal budgets, and it's something that smaller communities struggle with, but it's still an important part. And from what I've seen, this council's understanding that and trying to determine the best way to encourage that. So the utility operating fund had a budget of $790,000 for revenue. We fell short a little bit this year, primarily because there's less usage for certain customers, and it brought it down. But our expenses also fell as staff realized this early and were able to compensate for it. So our surplus deficit for the year, surplus before capital expenditures, was $41,000 compared to our estimated of $34,700, of which all of it was transferred to the capital program. One note that we make here is that through Terry's work, we've determined that the 5-year utility capital requirements are pretty near $3 million. That's 5 years, and to understand, that's utility only, so that's water and sewer and treatment plants. That doesn't include roads, doesn't include arenas or libraries or anything like that. That's mostly infrastructure in the ground that really should be replaced over the next 5 years. So in the utility capital fund, there have been pretty near $712,000 worth of project. As we talked about before, there's about $40,000 came from the utility operating revenues. Council authorized before Christmas $80,000 in reserve funds. Reserves essentially being savings accounts that have accumulated over the years to be able to use for that. Additional long-term debt of $75,000. But I will, at this point, I guess, say thank you to Karen Ludwig and John Ames, and our representatives in Ottawa and the province respectively, for moving forward our projects in the Canada Water and Wastewater Fund. And this was a financial arrangement where the two senior levels of government provided 75% of the funding for projects that we undertook this year. And so their portion of the $700,000 was actually $515,000. And so with good planning, council decided in December of 2016 to move forward with multiple projects, realizing this funding was available. And so for you that have lived in St. Andrews through the year, you've certainly seen a lot of work being done on Charles Street, Edward Street, down in Champlain, and various locations for the storm drain in the Front Street area.
So I think that paints a pretty good picture of a successful 2017, and we're confident that we're going to be just as successful in 2018. And I just want to point out to the folks at home in particular what many of the priorities that council is talking about. I should say 2018 and beyond. So council, very early on in your mandate, identified a number of strategic priorities, and most of those fall within the realm of our municipal plan. We are required by the province to update our municipal plan on a 5-year basis, and in fact we are overdue. The last time I think we had a new municipal plan was back in 2010. So that is a priority of council, and in fact you will be starting to meet on the municipal plan review next week. But included within that, a number of key strategic priorities have already been identified by council, those including a transportation plan, and hopefully that will include a component related to parking. I think we all can agree that there are issues, particularly in the downtown area, with regard to parking during the busy summer months. So transportation plan, as well as a recreation plan, an economic development plan, and an environmental management plan. So those are some of the many aspects that you'll be reviewing in 2018 as part of the municipal plan review. Some of the other priorities that have already been identified for 2018 include improving public communications through a new town website. In fact, we went out to tender last fall, and we hope to be awarding that within the next few weeks to get a new town website. Responsible asset management, a requirement of the feds and the province, and just good sound business practice, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We're also required to complete in 2018 a climate change adaptation plan. The province of New Brunswick has identified various areas around the province that are vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and parts of St. Andrews have been identified through that process. Council received a presentation by Rob Capozzi from the Climate Change Secretariat earlier in the fall, and we know that by the end of 2019 we have to have a climate change adaptation plan in place. We have partnered with the Eastern Charlotte Waterways to request funding through the Environmental Trust Fund to complete our adaptation plan for this year. Some capital priorities for 2018 include this arena roof. We've already talked about that. The repairs are in fact already underway. Vulnerabilities at Market Square have previously been identified, and as part of that process, we expect that there'll be significant infrastructure work that's required, and council has indicated a desire at the same time to look at a possible refresh of the design of Market Square and perhaps making it more accessible to a greater number of people here in town and a greater number of events. So initial estimates would put the work that needs to be done down at Market Square at around $1.5 million. A recent assessment of the wharf indicates to us that there are significant repairs that are required to be done down there as well, totaling approximately $1.5 million there. And council has indicated a desire to have a new health center in town, and we are looking at various options for locations and designs for a health center, but expect that the cost of that would be in excess of $1 million. One other priority for 2018, which does not have huge budget implications, but I think it's worth noting, is the implementation of a recycling program for the town. We have been working with the Regional Service Commission, and they have agreed on a region-wide recycling program. We expect that to be in place later in the fall of 2018, and we've got a lot of work to do to get ready for that, but that's exciting news for the town. I think the other priority that needs to be identified to the public is the need for us to store away, build up our reserves, so that for the many capital plans, capital work, for much of the capital work that we need to do in the future, we're going to need help from both the federal and provincial governments. And as those programs go, there is a requirement on the part of the town to contribute to the overall program. So we need to make sure that when those programs become available, that we are in a position to take advantage of those. So those represent some of the key priorities, big picture priorities that we'll be focusing on in 2018. If we start with the operational budget, I'll point out some of the operational savings that we expect to see in 2018. As mentioned earlier, we have transitioned our building inspection, planning and development services to the Southwest New Brunswick Region Service Commission, and we do expect to see efficiency, resource efficiencies and cost savings through that transition process. We have decided not to fill the retirement vacancy within the Public Works garage. In 2018, we will not be making an investment in Katie's Cove. We're not going to be required to provide an investment in the Rural Links bus service in 2018. We expect to see energy efficiencies here at this arena as a result of some of the infrastructure work that we did last year by replacing the chiller. And we have become aware that there are potential property tax savings to be seen at the museum and courthouse. So I already mentioned that we are working with the Regional Service Commission on our building inspection, planning and development services. The Regional Service Commission has also hired a economic development officer for the region, and we expect to be taking advantage of that partnership and realizing some savings and perhaps improving our bottom line as a result. So a few times through the presentation here, I've already mentioned our intention to enhance our asset management planning. This is a condition for both federal and provincial funding going forward, and in fact, we are required to have an asset management in place by the province by June of this year. So what is it? What's it all about? Well, in a nutshell, a systematic long-term plan for the optimal sustainable delivery of objectives through cost-effective life cycle management of our assets. And that's a bunch of pretty words, I know. But if we proceed to the next slide, perhaps I can frame it up a little bit better for you. Really what it means is that we will be taking a look item by item of all of our assets and doing a rating and ranking of each of those assets. There's a ranking that's to be done on the condition of each of those assets as well as the criticality of each of those assets. So what we're looking at is what's in good condition requires some maintenance. What's in average condition might require some major maintenance, and what's in poor condition, in other words, it's at the end stage of its useful life and requires replacement or disposal. So that condition rating is measured against the criticality. In other words, is there a very low consequence if that asset is to fail? Is there an average consequence or a high consequence? So in fact, we have to look at every meter of water pipe, every meter of storm sewage pipe, every meter of road surface, and so on and so on and so on, and do a determination of the condition versus the criticality. So we have initiated that process, and some of the assets, just to give you a picture of what that means, what are we talking about in our inventory? Roads and parking lot services, water, wastewater, stormwater systems, things like culverts, sidewalks, trails, our hydrants and fire suppression systems, street lights and signage, and besides all that, the buildings, roofs, windows, cladding, the mechanical systems, wharves, dams, bridges, breakwaters, all of our heavy equipment, maintenance equipment, and anything else that might come to light that we're not even aware of yet, or new investments that we intend to make. Right now, an approximate total value of our total assets is about $80 million. So that's a pretty big investment that we need to protect and make sure that we are able to maintain it for the long term. So we've taken an initial look at the inventory as it stands today. Water mains. We have over 40,000 meters of water mains in this town. Just think about that. You know, that's 40 kilometers of water mains. Total value of that, replacement value of that today, if we had to replace it, $15.5 million, okay? 16% of that is rated in poor condition today and high criticality. So within the next 5 years, we know that there's about $2.5 million worth of work that needs to be done on our water mains. And that's just one aspect. Sanitary mains, about 26,000 meters of sanitary mains, replacement value over $9 million. 7% rated as in poor condition and high criticality. Storm mains, 9,000 meters with a replacement value of $3.7 million, and 57% of our storm mains is rated as in poor condition and high criticality for a total of $2.1 million. Road surfaces, 33.5 lane kilometers of road surface with a replacement value of $11.6 million. Poor condition and high criticality, about $2.5 million worth of work that we need to do in the next 5 years. And so on and so on and so on. This is just a snapshot of some of those initial items that we've been taking a look at so far. So what are we looking at over the next 5 years on cost projection for maintaining or replacing those assets? This is only those assets that are, again, in poor condition and highly critical. Water mains, 1.8 million. Sanitary, almost 1 million. Storm mains, 600,000. Road surfaces, 1.8 million. Buildings, 1.1 million. Vehicles, at 1.5 million. The wharf, 1.8 million, and other assets. The significant piece that's missing in all of this to date that we know is coming, that we're going to have to deal with, is climate change adaptation. I mentioned earlier that the province has identified certain areas within the town limits where we need to do some critical mitigation planning work. And the Coastal Areas Protection Policy of the province requires that any new habitable space be located or installed at 2 meters above the higher high water large tide elevation. So if you take a look at the photo that's on the screen here, all of those areas in blue, we need to do something to protect those vulnerable areas, have a plan in place. And at this point in time, very initial stages until we go through the work of completing our climate change adaptation plan, we do not know what that's going to mean, but I can tell you it's going to be significant in the millions and millions of dollars. And we're not going to be able to do that alone, obviously. Okay? Okay, so that presents a high-level view of asset management and what we're required to do in the future. And getting down to the details again for 2018, I'll hand it back over to Chris.
So right now, I'm going to talk about the major capital projects that staff have presented to council. These are still subject to final approval, but after working together over these last 10 or 12 weeks, we've kind of narrowed them down to the short list, if you will, of projects that they're considering. So we're going to continue infrastructure work on Edward Street and Augusta Street to the tune of about $100,000. Street paving, including the Route 127, as we continue that project, and the council actually submitted a new 5-year plan to the province earlier in the fall. So we're going to, that's part of it, but about $300,000 of our new paving, or resurfacing, I guess, within the town, of which a portion of that is to go to Charles Street to kind of bring that street up to its final coat, and which has been a 3-year project on its own, replacing all the infrastructure there. As we've talked about many times, the arena roof is being done, kind of a 2-phase approach. There's what's being done right now and should wrap up, I'm hoping, by the end of the month. And then there'll be a second phase to complete the rest of the arena roof later in the spring. There's some vehicles and equipment for $105,000. Some structural work at various town facilities of about $90,000. As discussed, we've have set aside some money towards parking and public washrooms in the downtown core. Kind of always, especially during the summer, high priority for visitors and locals alike. And council is looking at various options there and to determine how much they want to spend. But right now, there's $115,000 put on the table for consideration. For the Wharf and Market Square, for the initial stages of some of the repairs to be done at Market Wharf to continue its long-term viability, plus I'll say probably the design phase of what's going to happen long-term at Market Square is about $180,000. As many of you know, we started a streetlight project a few years ago now, and we'd like to continue that and try to finish it up over the next 3 years. And so the next phase is about $50,000. And there's some other strategic priorities of council, including the courthouse, which they hope to finalize this year, and possibly renovate for some other town priorities for about $40,000. And so those are the major projects that are on the table for council. How these are going to be funded is this way. We expect there to be about $350,000 from tax revenue that'll be able to put forward to that program. $337,000 in extra borrowing. There's, over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been money put into our reserve funds. We're hoping to use $350,000 of that to offset it. And then again, through the generous partners in the federal and provincial governments, we hope to get another $1 million in additional funding to complete those, which includes the roof and hopefully Market Square. Now, there's been a discussion, and for any of those that look at the budget on an annual basis, you've seen that the town has been in a continuous loop of borrowing, but I think it's been responsible borrowing. And under regulations of the Local Governments Act, municipalities are allowed to borrow up to 20%, or let me rephrase that. They're allowed to have debt payments of 20% of their total budget. Well, right now, St. Andrews, even with this new borrowing that we're proposing for next year, is only going to be a little bit over 7%. So we're in a strong position as we move forward. Councils everywhere have to determine what they want to do about financing. From what I understand, talking to the authority in Fredericton that allows us to borrow, is that most municipalities are somewhere between the 7 and 12% mark, with a few that have gone in a hard investment in capital assets getting closer to the 20. But right now, that's a debate among this council and future councils, how fast you want to go with this stuff. But right now, the town is in a strong position to continue forward. So right now, after discussions with council and several meetings, we've determined that we're going to move forward with a 2-cent tax increase in the mill rate. So it's going to go from $1.19 to $1.21 per $100 of assessment. And as discussed before, that's a $60,000 increase in tax revenues. There's also going to be new water and wastewater payments or structure in 2018 that we'll get to in a little bit. This council feels strongly that in the mandate of many municipalities and levels of government, that users are going to have to pay a little bit more for a lot of the things that they use individually. And so things like permits, licenses, wharf usage, and arena, expect to see increases this year in those things. We're also looking at different revenue that people haven't seen before in the past, including things like encroachment policy, which means for those that use town land, and we'd be more used to seeing things like on the front street where restaurants or some of the stores will encroach on the sidewalk, that the council is considering starting to do fees for that use. And that is a very common policy right across the country, especially considering that it has wear and tear in our sidewalk, but it also creates some nuisance that our Public Works has to work around and things, and so that's to make up for that. One thing that's become important is more aggressive pursuit of grant funding. While there's the federal and provincial governments, there's different agencies within them that you go start looking for grant money. There's also different organizations, whether it's something like the Dunn Foundation, which we've done in the past, or the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Environmental Trust Fund. There are different pots all over the place, but it takes days to prepare grants. It takes time. It takes a little bit of politicizing by our councils to approach the different people to sell these things. But the town is going to really move forward on doing this, because Santa Claus just doesn't come around throwing sacks of money at the municipality. Sometimes you have to work a little extra harder to get it. And the council has talked about before, it's going to be a little more aggressive about the pursuit of development opportunities. I think the town's been fortunate the last couple of years. We've had the seniors residence down off the Champlain subdivision, which has been built, and that is going to our tax base. And as we've talked about before, there's development along Water Street that is being proposed for more condos. Now, that's not necessarily the only thing the town is looking at. It could be houses or other subdivisions, whatever. But they realize that growth is important, not just in the number of people, but in the number of operating units and stuff too. Now, in regards to the increase in the tax rate, I want to just put this in perspective. So if you have an assessed value of $150,000, you're only going to see a $30 increase in your tax rate. For sort of a medium-sized house, maybe have an assessed value of $300,000, we're only talking $60 increase in your tax bill. And then for larger houses, maybe at a $500,000 assessment, it's a $100 increase in your tax bill. I think we've talked about that the town offers lots of services and great opportunities. And we think the citizens are happy to share in those, the cost to maintain those on a year in, year out basis. For the utility fund, in 2018, there's a fairly good increase in revenue that we think we're going up to about $930,000 with projected expenses of $875,000. That'll leave us $55,000 to transfer into capital projects, with the balance of the capital program being taken care of either debt, reserve funds, or funding from other levels of government. But as the CAO had pointed out earlier, the projected 5-year capital needs within this department is about $2.9 million. So we're just touching the surface on it. For the 2018 utility capital program before council, we're looking at doing some water and sewer work along Edward Street from Water Street to the shore. That will essentially finish the work on that street that's been ongoing for several years. A new sanitary line on half a block of Ernest Street. The town hall actually has to relocate its water line, and that'll be undertaken in the spring, hopefully. One thing that we're looking at to be a little more proactive is to install SCADA system and alarms on lift stations. That gives us more real-time data that we can monitor from our homes in the middle of the night if we so choose. It's a combination of protecting the environment, but also meeting current regulations and things. And it's a worthwhile investment, and it's like $30,000 or $40,000 for a member. Also within the utility, we have to replace some pumps at the water treatment plant. And so the program for 2018 is about $290,000 worth of capital projects. Now, as discussed before, we're looking at a new water and wastewater rate structure moving forward. So thanks to Councillor Michelle, he was able to find a consultant from Nova Scotia that deals with this. And it was a really great learning experience for me and I think for council as well. So the name of the firm was Gary Eisner and Associates. So what I found out is that, at least in Nova Scotia and several jurisdictions across North America, municipal water rates actually have to be taken to a provincial agency. In Nova Scotia, it's the Public Utilities Board, similar to what we have here in New Brunswick. And every 3 to 5 years, municipalities have to take their water and sewer rates and prove that they're either getting enough income or that they're not overcharging their customers. And so we worked through a system with them to try to determine what the best rate structure was. And so what they look at is they want to generate sufficient revenue, not only to cover the cost of the operations, but also to cover the required capital investments going into the future. I'm sure many of you heard about the capital deficits or infrastructure deficits that are right across Canada. And the government can't bail out everybody at 100%. And so it's tools like this that are being used to determine what users should be paying appropriately to be able to do these things. It does involve assuming that you're getting a certain rate of funding from other levels of government, but it's to make sure that we have an ongoing ability to pay for this stuff going in the future. Now, the current rate structure is outdated. It's been here at least 20 years. In the view of the consultants, the way we had set it up, it was subsidized by the users with the lowest consumption, and then our rates were much lower than most other municipalities. Being from Nova Scotia, they actually had the rates for all the other municipalities in Nova Scotia. I think they told us they're in the bottom 5%, the St. Andrews, if we are a Nova Scotia municipality. But I even know, comparing in New Brunswick, we're at the low end, at least the lowest 25%. Now, this model that they use to calculate on this is actually based on an international standard from the American Water Works Association and the National Guide to Sustainable Municipal Infrastructure. So this isn't the case of a couple of people coming in just kind of playing with numbers to determine what it is. It is a predetermined formulary that is being used all over North America to try to come up with rate structures and providing good financial advice. The new model follows a principle of fairness. It's a user pay model, meaning that it's not only are you paying according to your consumption, but you're also paying based on meter size, which is the availability of water that's being made to you, and then the same consumption rate for all users. In the past, we used to have a 2-tier consumption rate, and at their recommendation, we're doing away with that. Looking about the water consumption across the municipality, we looked at what the consumption was as a percentage of total customers. And so we have approximately 850 customers within the utility. About 20% of them are using 5,000 gallons or less of water, so what we call the very lowest tier of our users. Another 23 or 24% uses between 5 and 10,000. And then another 27% uses between 10 and 15,000. So roughly 2/3 of the customers in town are using 15,000 gallons or less, and we'll see minor increases in their cost. Now, prior to a schedule that's before council right now to be approved with the budget is changes in the water rates. Now, under the old system, there was a limit of 30,000 gallons that people paid basically $210 for. There's a $140 base charge plus the $70 infrastructure fee. And then once you got over $250,000, you took a smaller rate or reduced rate of $225 per 1,000 gallons. Well, the new water consumption rate is based on $3.92 per 1,000 gallons, regardless of the amount of water you get. And so low-volume users prior to this next billing period had 30,000 gallons before the consumption charge kicked in. Well, now we have an adjusted base charge, which is a little lower, but now users are going to be charged on the first gallon of water that works through the meter. For wastewater rates, it used to be $4.25 for the first 1,000 of gallons, and then it dropped to $2.75 per 1,000 gallons once it got over the 250,000 gallon mark, which again only affects a fairly small number of total users. But again, at the recommendation of the formulary by the consultants, we're jumping to a $5.04 consumption rate per 1,000 gallons on all sewer water moving forward. What we're going to see on residential users, we're expecting a semi-annual increase of between $45 and $86, or an annual increase between $90 and $170. And we'll wrap up the presentation with our CAO.
Last slide, I promise. I just wanted to make a few closing comments. I hope that we've painted a picture for you of the growing capital needs that we have both on the operating side as well as the utility side, and the need for us really to start planning for that today in our budget. Council, in fact, through this deliberation process, worked through a 5-year budget. We're not prepared to present the final numbers on those, but I think it's important for the folks at home to understand that we are undertaking that long-term planning as we go through the process here. It's worth reminding folks as well that there's a significant unknown piece related to climate change. We don't know what that's going to mean at this point, but we do know that it is going to be significant. We have the recommendation from the consultants and from the international standards, or models, I should say, on utility rates. And we know that a good model would see the utility rates covering the costs of the utility capital. And ours today come nowhere near that level. We know that in order to meet all of our capital needs, we're going to need some help from the feds and the province, and we want to be prepared to make our contribution when those opportunities come along. And finally, I think it is recognized by council and important to point out to the viewers at home that given all of this information around our asset management requirements, climate change adaptation, and our requirements on our utility capital, that they should not be surprised if mill rates continue to increase in future years. So with that, I'll close the presentation and would take any questions from council, or just remind the folks at home that you will be deliberating and considering a motion at the meeting on Monday evening, the 15th, at 7 o'clock here in the VIC. Any comments from council at this point?
First of all, just to thank you for the presentation. Excellent job. Council's worked very hard on this, and needless to say, even though we haven't had a room full of participants and audience for a lot of these discussions, they haven't been a one-way discussion. There's been lots of animated discussion and lots of different opinions, but I think we're now all coming together to see that this is the way we have to go forward. And I guess the only thing I want to stress is that from a statutory point of view, it's not a nice-to-do thing to balance our utility budget. It's actually a statutory provincial requirement that we balance our utility budget. So the way to go with utilities is to make it user pay and to eliminate the long-standing practice of giving discounts to people who use more water and subsidizing it by putting minimum charges against people who use less water. So, in fact, it is going to be an adjustment, and we expect that as we get that down to the individual case, we'll have lots of questions, and we expect that. So please bear with us a little bit, and you'll see this change, I believe, in the bills that come out in April of 2018. Anyway, thank you.